If there's one economy in the world that is in trouble, it is the Eurozone. De-Industrialization is happening and it is getting worse. We know the powerhouse of Europe, Germany, has slipped into a recession, but this contraction is about to get worse. In a report by Reuters, the German economy will contract more than previously expected this year as sticky inflation takes its toll on private consumption. Germany's inflation rate, it is still at 6.4%, which is extremely high. It is more than double the CPI number of the United States, and this is crushing consumer demand and it's making it hard for their economy to recover. But it isn't just domestic consumption that's taking a hit. Now, yes, local Germans might be too broke to buy stuff, but Germany can always export to the world, right? Now, this is where the situation gets bleaker. You can only export to the world if there's sufficient demand overseas, that's number one, and your prices are sharp. You can't overcharge your customers for goods, even if it's a brand new German made car, right? And this is where things start to fall apart. Now, we've talked about deindustrialization in Europe before. Manufacturing is starting to leave because it just isn't profitable. Energy costs are high, salaries are higher, and companies just can't endure the pain any longer. Now, back in February, one of Germany's biggest manufacturers, BASF, shut down a fertilizer plant on German soil, and that led to around 2,600 job cuts. But this exodus isn't done yet. Listen to what their chief executive had to say. We are increasingly worried about home market. Profits is no longer anywhere near where it should be. And where do you think BASF is relocating their plants to? They are investing $10 billion in a complex based in China. That's 9,000 kilometers away. So instead of jobs being created in Germany, they are being relocated away. And this is the big problem Europe is facing when the inputs for success are gone, namely cheap energy. Your industries start to collapse, and very soon, Europe will become a service sector economy with manufacturing being chopped up and relocated to the rest of the world. And we need to talk about this because it's a real tragedy. The EU is the third biggest economy in the world. If a recession spreads across Europe, that could crush demand to the point where the rest of the world might slip into a recession as well. Now, it isn't just Germany that's in trouble. The French economy is also starting to burn. Pulling up a story from Bloomberg, top Euro area economies flash recession warning signals. We have both the German and the French PMI numbers starting to crash. The PMI numbers basically signal the health of a country's economy. If it keeps dropping, it means the country's economy is starting to contract. The economy is shrinking, which is obviously bad news. And what do we have? German PMI has dropped to 48.3, while France has crashed to 46.6 in July. Both numbers are well below all the estimates that tells us that this recession is worse than predicted. Remember that when the PMI is below 50, it is a clear sign of contraction. But let's take a closer look at the PMI trend because that reveals the true extent of the damage. And we can see that for both France and Germany, the sector that is collapsing the most is manufacturing. Those sectors are dragging down the rest of their economies. In Germany, manufacturing PMI has actually fallen below 40. It came in at 38.8, which is an emergency. It has never been that low before except during the 2020 lockdowns and the 2008 financial crisis. Things are really severe, guys. What we have is manufacturing demand collapsing across the board. Both domestic demand in France and Germany just isn't there. American and Chinese demand also isn't robust enough to save Europe. There's no Chinese miracle coming or American resilience coming to save the Eurozone. According to the Hamburg Commercial Bank, there is an increased probability that the economy will be in recession in the second half of the year. Whatever we are seeing now is just a preview of the disaster to come. And the bringer of this pain will be the ECB because interest rates are going to go higher. France and Germany don't control their own monetary policy, guys. It is dictated by Christine Lagarde seated in Brussels. If inflation across the whole Eurozone is high, the ECB will hike rates even further, even if it doesn't make sense for an individual member. Now, looking at the inflation numbers in the EU, we can see a clear problem. Whether it's headline inflation or core inflation, it is still much higher than the ECB's benchmark rate. Inflation is at 5.5%, while the policy rate is only at 3.5%. And we know the basics. To crush higher prices, you need to get interest rates above inflation. And this means higher rates are still coming for Europe. We could see interest rates hit 4% easily by the end of this cycle. This is obviously bad for European industries because raising money is now going to get more expensive. We just pass on more on the manufacturing costs. Now, higher rates is the obvious headwind coming. However, the real wild card is Putin himself. Will he trigger another energy crisis for Europe in 2023? And I think there's a big misconception floating around that Europe isn't importing any gas from Russia anymore. That isn't exactly true. If we track the amount of gas Europe is getting from Russia, there are still flows coming in. Obviously, Europe isn't getting any more gas from the Nord Stream pipeline. The Yamal pipeline through Poland has also been closed down. But the Ukraine transit and the Turk Stream pipelines are still operational. They are still transporting over 250 million cubic meters of gas from Russia to Europe. Now, the EU is still reliant on Russian gas to some degree. If we combine the total flows of oil and gas to Europe, you'll quickly see the degree of dependence. Even today, Europe can't completely decouple from Russian energy yet. In a study by Bruegel, they estimated that Europe will still be buying Russian energy well into 2024. In fact, energy payments will hit 20.8 billion euros, while oil payments comes in at 7.7 billion. Europe isn't out of the woods yet. They can move towards renewables 100%, but it will take decades to completely replace fossil fuels. And the fate of this energy crisis all comes down to Mother Nature. Now, the big question is if Europe will face a mild or harsh winter. Now, if it's mild, then the Eurozone could escape a second wave of inflation. According to Morgan Stanley, a mild winter could halve European gas prices to 15 euros, but that's highly dependent on warm weather and good performance from renewable energy. Either one is a very big coin flip. We can see that even today, after the big price drop, European gas is still more expensive than before the crisis. It is still double the price. Europe managed to dodge a nasty inflation crisis because the last winter was mild. But if that miracle doesn't happen again, prices are going to explode up. Now, if winter is colder than before and renewables can't perform, gas prices could spike up to 100 euros, and that would just devastate European manufacturing. But even if it doesn't, the bank forecasts an average of 45 euros, which is still higher than today's levels. So just imagine if Putin decides to pull the plug this winter, and that will throw another spanner into the works. If winter is harsh and Russian gas gets cut away, then manufacturing is gonna suffer. So how bad is Europe's deindustrialization crisis? Isn't as bad as we think, and this is where we need to look at the facts. Now, pulling up a story from the Financial Times, Germany's failure to attract business investment is alarming, and the reasons they gave are rather obvious: high corporate taxes, excessive bureaucracy, and ailing infrastructure for decline. But just look at the numbers, guys. It is literally an investment crisis. More than 135 billion euros of foreign direct investment flowed out of the country. In contrast, only 10.5 billion euros went in. In other words, investors are pulling their money investments out of Germany. They don't see an immediate future there to grow their business, so investors are running away. In fact, this declining interest in Germany has been going on long before the conflict. Since 2017, the number of FDIs in Germany has been declining year after year because it is just not profitable anymore. So if you're an investor, especially in manufacturing, you want to invest in a place that gives you three main advantages. You want a place where energy prices are cheap, and that allows you to lower your cost of production per unit, and that's a very straightforward equation. Secondly, you want to find a location that gives you cheap and ready financing. Basically, you want to access loans to grow your business, but the credit situation in the Eurozone is getting from bad to worse. In a poll by the ECB, 27% of banks have tightened their credit. Their standards are stricter for approving loans to companies. We are now above the 2020 levels and moving up towards '08 conditions. So that's strike number two. And finally, you want a country that gives you direct access to a huge market. And that means when you manufacture goods in a country, you also want to sell them in the exact same place. Now, if we look at the world's top consumer markets in the world, the top three are the United States, India, and China. Even if we fast forward to 2030, the list doesn't change. It is still the same three countries: China, India, and America. In fact, if we look closely at European countries like France, Germany, and Italy, their consumer class is dying. over the next 10 years, they will be spending less and less. They are falling 2 or 3 ranks down. Even Mexico will have a bigger consumer class than Germany. So if you manufacture in Europe, you will still need to re-export your products out to the United States, out to China to reach the bulk of your consumers. There's simply not enough demand in Europe. Now combine that with higher energy costs and tightening credit, you might as well just manufacture en masse. And that's why we are seeing European companies run to the United States and run to China. And if investments keep leaving the country, that means companies can't expand, and that will snowball into job losses and higher unemployment. I think this is a very simple connection, a simple correlation that we can all see. Unemployment in Germany is starting to rise, hitting 5.7%, and employment growth is slowing. There are now 192,000 more unemployed in Germany today than a year ago. So, this is affecting real people, real households, and real families. Now, I wish I could come in with some good news, but things are looking really bleak for the Eurozone. And if I had to boil it down, it comes down to three main problems, three main issues. The first is America's Inflation Reduction Act. And if you didn't know by now, the bill allows America to heavily subsidize their industries with a ton of loans and tax breaks. And this diverts investors away from Europe and moves them to the United States. Europe just can't compete here. And the second is electric vehicles, EVs. Europe has missed the bus and they are behind the 8 ball here. German brands like Mercedes and Volkswagen didn't innovate fast enough and they are lagging behind. In China, Volkswagen's electric cars are playing a catch up game with China's BYD, while Tesla is crushing German automakers as well. So German made cars aren't coming to save Europe. Once you lose the lead, you'll forever be trying to play catch up. But the absolute craziest thing Europe is doing is cutting away its lifeline with China. Now, China is the EU's biggest trading partner, but they're still moving to decouple with Beijing. In a report by CNN, Germany has officially unveiled a strategy to cut reliance on China, which is quite ridiculous. In fact, the German government just published a 60-page document titled Strategy on China, which I find rather obsessive. And if we look into the details, they are basically looking to reduce dependence on China when it comes to medicine, EVs, and chip making, which means costs in those industries are going to soar higher and is yet another blow to their own manufacturing. Now, China, of course, is having none of that. They even cancelled a trip from the EU chief, Joseph Borrell, and this isn't a good sign. China is probably tired of all this posturing, and that's why I really feel that we are living in a twilight zone. Nothing really makes sense anymore. Europe is trying to destroy their own industries while trying to save them at the same time. That isn't going to work. So we should prepare for Europe to slip into a deeper recession all the way till 2024, maybe even 2025. And things could get worse if a harsh winter comes or if Russia decides to cut off their gas supply. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will Europe ever recover or will they continue to deindustrialize? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.